He wants to jump
1,000 cars. Sir, you have 1,000 cars.
I don't think I'd attempt to try this stunt.
Or we owe this horsepower to Uncle Sam.
Too many cars.
car. Roses would be...
Like I put my beer belly on it.
If you can't immediately tell somebody how many cars you have.
You'll really give those uppity yuppies something to think about.
Stay on the bar. Don't go off the bar with your Bronco.
1980 Volvo horns. What's right? I want to have a man's coolant.
And he's like, oh, I thought it'd be small. It's for a small car. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still an automatic transmission. They're never going to be light.
It's definitely going to have to crash.
Starting off with Brad buying another car.
That's the West.
Internet. You know, is this a Nigerian oil print?
I also wish you drove a tan Camry.
Anyways,
Anyway,
that's a
horrible,
very
horrible podcast content.
Very
Talking about a picture.
inside joke. Welcome back to Auto Off Topic. If you're listening to this in order, it's late. But if you're just listening to this because you went back, you're not even going to notice. So,
Sometime in the future.
yeah, I had COVID, so couldn't really talk. It's like the longest duration head cold. That's really what it was, like a really bad head cold.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say. The whatever variant that's happening right now is pretty much seems to be that. So I was actually sick last week as well, and I thought I might have it, but did not, according to testing anyway.
Made it 3 years. That was the first time.
Well, that was your first time, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
First time I tested positive, at least. So who knows? Anyway,
it
was also, let's hit on all the things. It was negative 40 here on Saturday. So
I think you're exaggerating a little bit.
No, it was.
The wind chill was negative 40.
Yeah. So therefore it was negative 40.
No, it was not negative 40.
Yes, it was.
It feels like negative 40, but it's not actually negative 40.
If you went outside, it doesn't matter what the air temp is because the wind chill is negative 40.
Okay.
You'll still get frostbite even faster.
It was cold. It was cold.
Cold as
I heard it was cold. I mean, I don't know that it was cold because I don't live there anymore. Because intelligence.
Yeah.
But I heard it was pretty cold. I heard they had record-breaking temperatures on Mount Washington as well. So
yeah, negative 108.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really cold.
Yeah, it's as cold as
that
the
wind
surface
chill?
of the moon.
Was that actual air temperature, or was that
air temp
wind chill?
Was negative 40 actually.
Right. So then wind temp.
Actually, air temp was negative like 48. Like that broke that record.
Insane.
The winds were super high, and the lowest wind chill temperature.
All I know is that I heard it was cold enough to break Bronco roofs.
I only saw that once, so I don't know what that's about.
It's made the rounds. I saw it. Maybe the Drive, I think, was talking about it today, and a couple other places.
But,
so whether it's legit or not, maybe something fell on it while it was cold.
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely cold. What things can only be rated to a certain amount.
Yeah, negative 40 is not it.
Yeah.
Either way, if I bought a brand new Bronco and the roof just shattered because it was cold out, I'd be pretty ticked. So I guess we'll have to hold off and see what actually happened there. But as of right now,
I mean, yeah,
this unproven news story.
But also, if it's super cold and something hits it, then it's just going to shatter. Like if
just like your windshield would,
or bumpers.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have like a seemingly not very hard hit of a bumper if it's really cold here, and your bumper will just shatter.
Yep, there's no flex in it because it's too cold.
My Montero cover, the plastic buckles, it was so windy, the cold shattered the buckles and the straps.
Oh, that's annoying.
So that was blowing all over the place.
That's annoying. You know what I use for those? Because the plastic buckles around here wind up getting chewed by dogs sometimes. Because they hang down and they flap, and it's hard to keep the dogs away. So what I've used to keep it together is the nylon straps, and then I attach them to the bottom of the cover with like really heavy clamps, like plastic clamps. And that usually keeps it down pretty well.
Well, this one still had the eyelets, so I just put the
tied
rubber bungee cords on it.
Yep, that works too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anyway, so after all that boring conversation, weather and COVID, wintertime sucks in New England. Wintertime's been great here because it's, not New England. So I have been doing project car stuff, so we'll be able to touch on that a little later. In fact, why don't we just jump right into that today?
Yeah, go for it, man.
All right, so this is the big one. We've been waiting for this for a while. The 1980 Toyota Corolla that I picked up sometime last year. I've talked about my disdain for fender flares on not rusty cars because I hate seeing good sheet metal cut up for nothing. I finally got my fenders replaced on the front of the car. So I think we've covered it before. On the rear of the car, they did not cut the fenders. They merely pulled them and drilled through the body to attach the flares. But at least they didn't actually cut the lips off. But in the front of the car, they took a Sawzall to the fenders and they cut open the fender to put the flares on, which is incredibly frustrating because I couldn't just take the flares off and bodywork the fenders. I needed to find fenders. So fortuitously, I was at one of our weekly car gatherings here, and a young man with another Corolla parked next to me, and he was commenting how he liked my wheels. I intended on replacing the wheels because while they weren't ugly by any means, they're not my style. I'm more of a traditional era of the car kind of a wheel guy. Always have been. And they were
kind of ugly.
I wouldn't say they're ugly. On the right car, they'd be okay. If they were on a newer Civic or something, they'd be fine.
I guess they're like zero offset 2010 wheels, like from the 2010s.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, they're fairly modern, I think. They on a Miata, maybe, but whatever. So yeah, they were like a dark gunmetal gray 8 or 9 spoke wheel. Like the fronts were 15x8s, the rears are 15x9s, and they're zero offset. Which is why they put flares in the car. Obviously, that's too big for a Corolla. That being said, it was running 195 series tires on those 9-inch wide wheels. So I also don't like that big stretch look. So anyway, I wanted to change them. And he was mentioning how he likes them. And I was like, well, your car has the 1 year only 1980 nose. If you're interested in these wheels, you can't fit them on your car without cutting the front fenders. But I will trade you fenders. So I'll give you my fenders for your fenders. And I'll also give you the wheels because I don't want them. So this kid's 20, 21 years old. So if somebody who had a set of wheels when I was 20, 21 years old wanted to give them to me simply to change fenders that I would have to cut anyway to use them, I probably would have gone for it. And he definitely went for it. So that makes me happy because not only does he get a set of wheels for his car, we don't have to ruin another set of fenders to run them. So and oddly enough, his car is an 83, which is a square headlight front end, which is a different shape fender. But somebody in his car's past swapped to the 1980 front end. And his car is a kind of a light beigeish yellow color. It's actually the same color code as my 81 Cressida. Except when somebody swapped the nose of his car, they swapped a brown nose onto his car.
Weird.
So not only did I get fenders, but I have brown fenders. So the color is a little off. It's not quite as heavily metallic as the color of my car. It's probably the color of my car was factory, but when my car was repainted, it was repainted with a little more of a root beer color versus just the brown. But I'm much happier having a mismatched set of brown fenders with no fender flares than I am having the factory color, or the color correct for the rest of the car fenders because the car needs paint anyway. So unfortunately, they do have fender mirrors on them. I was not going to run fender mirrors in the car, and when I do the rest of the car, I'll probably remove them and fill the holes that were created for those. Excuse me. A bit yawn right there. Apologize.
It made me yawn.
Yeah.
It's so weird how that works.
Very unprofessional right there of me. It just came out of nowhere. I'm maybe
We're not even
drinking
in the
coffee.
same room, though. Why does that work that way?
With 3,000 miles apart.
Life's mysteries.
Yeah. I had a busy day today. We'll put it that way. So anyway, it does have fender mirrors, which I don't hate, but I probably don't want to run when the car is done. I'd rather have just the factory stock door mirrors. But they're fine for now. So I haven't put my fenders back on the car yet because, much like anything, we get that, what do we call it, Andrew? Project creep, scope creep, where we get into something and you decide you want to do more before you put it back together.
Okay.
So my car didn't have fender liners for who
Right.
knows how long, because when you cut the fender, he also
They'll
cut.
fit.
Oh yeah, they cut the outer mounting points for the fender liners, and also I'm sure they would rub the wheels. So these new fenders that I got, I also got the fender liners, so I can put the fender liners in and make the car look more factory. But I want to take the areas where the sheet metal has been blasted by just the rocks while driving it, and it's all bare metal. So I'm going to paint the inner fenders before I put it all back together. So the car
fair
right
enough.
now is sitting on 4 jack stands. I need to get in there and get some degreaser and some soap and water and wash up underneath there. And I'm going to put a nice just flat black coat on everything that's exposed, so that when I put the new fender liners on and the fenders on, you won't be able to see any of the old stuff in there. It's not a huge deal right now, but that's one of those things that it's already done now. The car's apart. I might as well do it so I don't have to do it when I paint the car later. Also, it'll just make it more pleasurable working on the car, because the next step for the car, once I put these fenders and the wheels on, is going to be to update the suspension to make it all proper. So it's going to have the Spit Modena by Enki wheels on it that you bought a couple years ago for the G20 that didn't actually fit, unfortunately.
No.
So, and then later down the road, we traded them for a different set of wheels. Now they're in my possession, and they match the car pretty much perfectly. So they got that gold center and the polished lip, and they're gonna look pretty nice in the car with a set of 195, probably 195 60 14s. That's gonna match pretty much the overall height that I'm looking for, and make the car sit low but sit proper, and just not look quite as ridiculous as with those 15x9 0 offset wheels on it. So, but yeah, that makes 2 people happy. So I'm happy. I have good fenders. He's happy. He has flares and new wheels. Everything's good. He put the wheels on his car. His car is not quite as low as mine, so it doesn't even rub in the rear, and the fronts are clear because of those flares and fenders. So he's stoked. I'm stoked. Everybody's happy, and the Corolla is making that progress down the road. The beauty of it is, other than buying tires, which I was going to have to buy anyway, this whole thing cost me $0.
Nice.
I just had to do some labor. So I helped him take the fenders off his car, helped him put my fenders on his car. And then the only hiccup there really was, there are entirely too many bolts holding the fenders on the front. There's, in a span of like 4 inches, there's 5 10-millimeter bolts on each side that are just impossible to get to, because it's an increasingly small area as you go up towards the bumper. And it was a nightmare getting the top bolts off, which means that the top bolts aren't going back in, and there's so many other bolts around them, it doesn't matter. It's totally fine. It doesn't actually affect anything. So that's gonna be as is. But also, the only big hiccup was somebody at some point glued the front fenders on my car, and I don't know why. Yeah. They used some kind of either 2-part epoxy or super sticky tape along the top of the fender apron. So I had all the bolts off and the fenders wouldn't budge. I had to take a chisel and hammer and peel back the lip on the top of the fender to break the seal to get them off. They were glued on with so much material, there was no getting them off without absolutely destroying the lip of them. So we had to re-bodywork that on his car once he put it back together too, because there was no way to mount them. Just a disaster. That took almost as long as getting all the bolts off, if not longer.
Weird.
So the whole swap took like 3 hours. It wasn't a big deal, except for that one part. So yeah, pretty stoked on that. I also drove the car down to, I don't know if you remember the guy who painted my Cressida a couple years ago.
Oh, yes.
His name is Danny. He runs a shop called Prism Auto Design. so I trust him pretty exclusively for bodywork out here. I brought the car down to him because it does have that bend in the frame rail. That's, I don't know, probably a foot from the front of the frame rail back. So it's right near where the suspension mounting points are, because I want to have that straightened out before I do all the new suspension in the car as well. So once I get that straightened out, it's going to have the frame rail be even on both sides, because right now the bumper is kicked up a little bit on the passenger side. So I'll have the frame rail taken care of. I'm not going to have him body work it, other than just making it pretty straight and getting it looking half decent, and then I'll finish body working that here. Then I'll put the new suspension on, and I have sourced a set of JDM chrome thin line bumpers to put the JDM style bumpers in the front, and really start transforming this car for not a lot of money. It's
Cool.
Yeah, it's making me pretty happy. It's been a pretty good car, so I think it's fun to treat to this kind of stuff. So those are the project updates. I'm waiting for his quote now to get that taken care of, and I'll bring that down to him and get that straightened out so I can move on to the next step. So that's the only real project update I've had here. I unfortunately have had a pretty busy week or 2 weeks since we last recorded, and I haven't had a chance to figure out the rest of the Merc core. I have the parts here, just I got to shuffle things around and get to working on it. And I have a small down date. I did a scouting trip for the West Coast Forenoon Cup with a friend out here. We took my 78 Colt and his 76 Celica liftback.
Right.
And I snapped one of the pop-out windows on the Colt. They have a latch inside. It's plastic, and it's been cracked since I bought the car.
I thought you had 3D printed ones for that.
It finally snapped. We're getting there. I do have 3D printed ones to change them out. I haven't done it yet, but that's in the list. I wasn't going to put them in until the part broke, because I figured, it wasn't worth, in case they wind up breaking. Why use them now? The part still worked, but unfortunately the part did break, so now I need to actually change it over. So small down date, but that'll be fixed hopefully tomorrow. Actually, it's in my list of things to do tomorrow. So tomorrow is finish getting the fenders on the Corolla, get tires for the wheels, and have that car all sorted and fix the Colt. So some project car updates. But yeah, we did a Forenoon Cup kind of scouting run. We're looking at doing it in the next 30 days. And keep your eyes peeled for that on the Discord channel. And if I know you local, I'll message you and we'll figure it out. So, or if you hear this and you want to know what it's about, feel free to message me either on the Auto Off Topic page or my personal Instagram page, the TSISS350, because sometimes the Instagram algorithm for messages now is weird on a business page. So the message might get lost if you message the Auto Off Topic page. So yeah, those are my project car updates out here, Andrew. So I don't think I did anything else. I think it's basically
all right.
it.
Well, speaking of Discord, I last week set up a new dirt rally championship for us.
Excellent.
I made a channel for it in Discord, so you can come hang out. Or you might be from before, you might already be in our dirt rally club. So that's active. I made it active for 2 weeks. There's a week left on it. Probably 5 days left on it by the time this podcast goes up.
Plenty of time.
I was trying to give people enough time to get their sim rigs set back up or whatever. It's all H2, so front wheel drive. Basically, your only choice is the Golf or the Pug.
Yeah, the 205 or the GTI. Yep.
And the first one is Monte Carlo.
Oh, good. Right into the hardest one you can do.
Well, it was the first of the season, so
yeah, it makes sense.
I was trying to coincide with that, and then it's wintertime, so that's a winterish one, and then the next one will be Sweden. That's all snow.
I
forget what I did for the other ones.
I like the Sweden track a lot. The Sweden stage a lot, because it's not as unpredictable as Monte Carlo, or Monte Carlo is sometimes grip, sometimes none.
And we've had a couple people download Dirt Rally 2 to play, because it's like really cheap now to buy. And I think someone said it's like on Xbox Game Pass. So if you've got the Game Pass, it's It's basically free.
Yeah, it's basically free. Perfect. Yep, sign up for that. That'll be fun. I need to make my run, but the full 2 weeks for the event is pretty good, so I can get in there and do it.
Yeah. So speaking, motorsports started back up. I don't think we talked about the Daytona 24 Hours.
We have not. We haven't recorded since then.
That was a cool race. GTP cars are back. They're hybrid.
Yep.
There was Porsches, there's Cadillacs, Acuras.
It seems like the hybrid. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Unfortunately, I was busy. I didn't get to watch too much or learn too much about it. But were they hybrid much on track, or was it only basically like under caution or in the pits?
I think they'd use hybrid for boost, basically.
Okay,
They'd leave
like
the
push to
pits in a
pass kind of
hybrid,
deal.
and I think under caution they might cruise on it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about them. Unfortunately, I couldn't pay too much attention, but it seemed to be a pretty good event, and the GTP class seemed to be like, I don't know, people were saying it was a callback to like the old GTP cars, and it actually seemed to be a legitimate time, like a legitimate callback to it. Like it was actually good.
Mm-hmm. It was a good race.
So, awesome.
It was cool.
I wish I saw more of it. Unfortunately, I didn't.
And then a week later, we're getting into the Busch Clash is back.
Yes.
And also, actually, before that, because it's the time difference, was the Bathurst 12-hour.
Yep.
Which is cool that they just live stream it on YouTube. There's no like blackouts or anything, so it's super easy to watch now.
Yeah, I think it's also on the Motor Trend app if you have that, but it's probably the same coverage on YouTube, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's even easier on YouTube.
Yep. Yeah,
which
that's
is
cool.
nice.
I saw some highlights and clips of that. I do wish we had V8 rear-wheel drive Altimas here, but
Did you watch the mixed sedans? I think it was called.
I did not.
So mixed sedans is like kind of cars that are like a little bit older race cars. They used to run them all together, I guess, but now they split out the Bathurst to just GT3 class cars because the closing speeds are too ridiculous. So like mixed sedans are like, they've got aero, but you'll have like some Corvettes and like Mustangs and stuff like that.
Which I can cars from like
Skylines,
2010 probably.
There was even some older. I mean, there was like an R34 Skyline. Was this thing?
Okay, so early.
Did you watch the video of the
90s.
Skyline? That was an absolute rocket ship.
No, I have not watched it yet.
Okay,
I guess I'll have to watch it. Was it an R34?
I think so.
Or R35?
No, R34.
Okay.
Like, he like basically the guy like tuned it for the straights. It's like
so his
in Gran Turismo or
doing
Forza
GTR things. Yeah.
When you've got the fully built car and you enter it in one of the lower races, you just blast by everybody on the straight.
Yep.
And you like maybe barely make the corner and then just keep blasting away from everybody on the straights.
Right.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Halfway through the race, you need brakes.
Yeah. So that was pretty crazy. The endurance part, the normal part of the 12-hour, that was pretty cool too. Some good racing. That's definitely a bucket list race to go see.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one. I'd love to go to see anything at that track. I think my favorite thing, I don't know if they still run it there or not, but they used to do the improved touring there, which was like cars from the 60s through the 90s that were just, full grip cars to run there. There's a couple videos. I think one of my favorite videos is like a 73 Toyota Celica racing a 94 Civic hatchback. And it's just impressively close racing. So, cool stuff. Yeah, I'd love to go see some of that stuff out there. There's also some videos from in period of Starions racing at Bathurst that are just some of my favorite go-to videos on YouTube. So, definitely a cool track.
And then it was Clash weekend,
which was very fun.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of didn't know what to expect last year. And now this year, yeah, it was like all bets are off. Like,
Yep.
it was pretty darn good.
Well, there were a couple of things that were improved this year. So they weren't coming into the event as the first event with a new car.
Right.
So they'd already made improvements, like they weren't breaking gearboxes or axles like they were last year. And the toe link debacle of last year had been straightened out. So
Right.
it wasn't like minor contact bent a toe link every time like last year. It took a much heavier hit. They also softened part of the chassis on the cars because there were unfortunately a couple of concussions last year when cars backed into walls because the
Yeah.
cars were too stiff. So they softened I guess if you liken it to a street car, kind of like a crumple zone. So they made a
Yes.
section of the chassis that absorbs the impact before that impact goes to the driver. So those are all obviously positive things. One thing I will say is the entire event last year had 5 cautions, and this one had 17. It was quite a bit of spins, especially in turn 2.
They added mufflers to the cars too.
Yes, they added mufflers just because it's inside that bowl.
Yeah, but it was cooler because then you could actually hear, like the in-car, you could hear the
Yeah,
transmission more.
it wasn't like they weren't loud.
No.
So it wasn't like they took NASCAR and neutered it. It was certainly still loud. But yeah, like you said, you could hear the transmission from the in-car and you could hear tires squealing on the track.
It's like when I'll wear earplugs at like a concert. It like doesn't make the music quieter, but it takes out like the reverberation that like bothers me in my ear.
Yeah.
Like just
I
just cuts it just enough.
Yeah, it brings it down to a level of sanity. So
And they did that, and then it's cool because you could hear them when the front end would slide. You could hear the tire screeching.
Yep, or when they spun around.
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking, with the 5 cautions versus 16 or 17 cautions this year, every track they run on is the same surface year after year after year after year. This track is ridiculous because they build the track, pour the asphalt, and then after the race is over, tear it all up. They don't leave it for next year. So the racing surface is different. And I wonder if that kind of factored into there being so many spins this year because they all expected the grip level of last year, went in with the cars set up like last year, went in with last year's tire choices, and then, had a much less grippy surface for some reason. And the cars just were spinning. I mean, most of the spins were caused by contact in the
I thought
driver's
they also
quarter
gave it
panel.
a wider tire in the back too.
Did they?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed weird. There were so many spins this year compared to last year when it's the same drivers and the same track and the same cars.
Yeah, people are racing harder though.
You think they're racing harder?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. There were a lot of, like I said, most spins were caused by a car in the back on the inside, usually in turn 2, contacting the left side quarter panel behind the tire and dumping the car basically around. So
the other thing
some
is,
were more egregious than others, but it's all racing at that point.
I mean, the other thing is too, they realized that with how tough the bodies are, they could beat off each other,
mm-hmm.
and it wouldn't wreck the cars too much. And you're not going fast enough that the aero matters.
No, I think the qualifying speed was like, 68 miles an hour?
Yeah.
They
And
hit
honestly,
80, 82, 83 miles an hour on the stretch.
yeah, you're right. There was only like a couple of clean crossovers, and the rest was just bump and dumps.
Yep.
And
Which is short track stuff. I mean, that's what you're going to see if you go to like a quarter-mile
I
dirt
know.
track in Pennsylvania.
There's people that are like, oh, it's like it was too rough. Like okay, that's what do you expect?
Yeah, sure.
It's better than like
Big
I don't
whatever
know.
to that.
It's better than Formula One, where if they touch, the cars just explode.
Well, and that goes back to what I said earlier. Like, they got to the point where they fixed the suspension components that were bending too easily. So now they can, have a little bit more door-to-door contact without bending those, toe links in the rear especially. And the bodies have enough give that they allow a little bit of bumping. And, I don't know, NASCAR was built on rubbing is racing, right? I mean, isn't that what has been from day one with NASCAR?
Well, what are they going to do?
So
Not
let's do
pass
it.
each other?
Yeah, and then they have Formula One again. Just a bunch of cars driving in a line, no passing. I'm way into it, and I've said this 1,000 times last year. Like, everything NASCAR is doing right now even if the individual experiment doesn't work each time, at least they're trying stuff and they're trying to be, relevant and trying to make changes to make it more competitive and make it more fun. And I thoroughly enjoyed last year's season. And I know the Clash isn't technically part of the season. It's kind of like a exhibition, doesn't count for points or anything. It's just TV ratings and get sponsors cars out there at prime time. But it was a fun way to start the season, and I think it's going to. I think it shows what kind of season we're going to be in for. I think it's going to be a lot more aggressive this season overall, even on the bigger tracks. There aren't a lot of small tracks other than this in Bristol, and they do 2 races at Bristol. And one of them
Bristol's
is
dirt.
Yeah, they do a Bristol pavement race too. Still, I think though.
What about what's Dover? Am I thinking of Dover?
Dover's
Or
bigger.
What's the one that's the total like bowl?
Bristol.
That is Bristol. All right.
Yeah, Bristol's the bowl. So it's like a
Okay.
quarter-mile oval. So it's bigger than the Coliseum track. I don't remember how big the Coliseum track is, but
They said a quarter mile.
is it a quarter mile?
Yeah.
All right, fine. Maybe Bristol's. I thought Bristol was a different length, but stupid facts.
Am I
Recording live, not being able to look things up.
Yeah, but am I thinking of the right track where it's like Bristol has the extreme
Banking.
banking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, no question.
Couldn't remember. But no, it's like, oh, we should bring they should put it back to Daytona. Like, no, it's super lame. You have 2 back-to-back Daytona races?
So
Who
Bristol's a
cares?
half mile.
Okay.
So it's twice the size of the Coliseum track.
But also they should they're going to Wilkesboro Speedway this year for the
Yep.
All-Star.
That's a half mile too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's cool because they basically rebuilt that racetrack for that.
Yep, that's one of the ones they visited on that Dale Earnhardt Jr. show,
Yeah.
where he goes to the old tracks and they talk about them.
Which is if there's some old tracks that are still around, they should do that that should be like a rotating event. And just pick some small town track.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to give back to people that are fans.
Yep, absolutely. I'm into it.
And that was the other thing.
They've proven they can run on dirt now too. So if it's dirt track, who cares?
Yeah. What was the? Oh my gosh, who's the announcer?
Which one?
What is his name? He brought up the Pinto Revolution.
Yes. I don't remember the announcer's name right now because he put me on the spot. But yeah, it was neat because we used to rallycross all the time at Stafford Speedway.
Yeah,
And it was
in the parking
neat
lot.
hearing the broadcast
like,
of a
what?
NASCAR race talk about Stafford Speedway.
I was
Well,
like,
that
wait,
one
what?
driver, his last name is Pierce. Yeah, Pierce. He's from Connecticut. So his
Yeah.
home track was Stafford, which is why they were bringing it up. But then he started talking about what Stafford Speedway means to NASCAR and racing in general and the history of it, where that went from being the old jalopy track to, the more modern era of NASCAR style cars was kind of born there, which is pretty cool, actually. I didn't
Yeah.
know any of that. Didn't know any of that history. Where they went from being just, old junkyard sedans to being like purpose-built race cars. So very, very cool stuff. And that's on obviously not, the cup level. That's on, more of a local track level. So yeah, it was super cool to watch the race. I enjoyed every minute of it. There was a lot of up and down emotion from everybody. You were winning the race didn't mean you're going to win the race because you could get bumped from behind and spun around pretty easily. So I know, towards the end, Bubba Wallace was leading, but he got there because he bumped Denny Hamlin out of the way. So
Yeah.
and then he got bumped out of the way, and it's like, oh well, it is what it is. So it all kind of filtered out in the end. And who won the race, Andrew? It was
Martin Truex.
Truex Jr. Yep, Truex Jr. So yeah, I'm pretty into it. There was one more thing I wanted to bring up about NASCAR this year, and I had it in my head a second ago, and now it has escaped me. So that stinks.
I don't think we talked about the Garage 56 car.
Nope.
That thing is dope. Oh my god.
Which car is that?
It's the next gen cup car that's built for Le Mans.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that car. Yes, 100%. Garage 56. Yep. We
Yep.
did talk about that when it was first announced.
We did.
Yep.
But they did testing after Daytona with it.
Yep. Yeah,
It's
the
got the
Camaro.
lights in it. It's got all the dive planes on it.
Yep.
They
Super
were
cool.
testing driver changes, so they go through the window.
Yep.
It still gets solid doors. They're going to jack it up with hydraulic jack, with a regular jack like a NASCAR.
Yep.
No air jacks. It's really, really cool. And it was supposedly running times that were consistent with GT3 cars.
Which is amazing.
Rolex at the Daytona road course. So
Yeah.
that should be very, very cool.
Yeah, this is not the first time this has happened either, because back in the 70s, was it Pearson's car? There was one that ran before.
Yeah, I don't know who it is though.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was a red and white vehicle. I think it was the Purelator. Oh man, all this stupid stuff is gonna kill me right now. They had like strapped fog lights to the front of it, and it's happened. It's happened before. I know that, so it's cool to see it happening again. So I had to look real fast here. I had to look it up, but it looks like Fireball Roberts was a NASCAR driver who has run in Le Mans before, but did it in a Ferrari. But there was a number 4 Dodge Charger. So in 1976, 2 NASCAR coupes were there. So 1 Torino and 1 Dodge Charger. So it's not the first time it's happened, but it's definitely cool to see it happen again. So I'm into it. The car looks really cool. Like, it looks really cool. It's definitely going to make me watch a lot more Le Mans. I watch it anyway, usually, but I'll be rooting for the Camaro this year. That's going to be fun. Plus, Camaro endurance racing cars are some of my favorite cars of all time. If you go back and you do a Google search for Camaro endurance racing cars, first and second gen, some of the coolest looking Camaros ever built were built for those races. You know, slightly widened fenders, big deep tires, and all the driving fog lights attached to the front. You know, as Le Mans cars had at that time. It's so good. Everything about it is so good. So yeah, I'm way into that. So, speaking of racing, Andrew,
Yeah.
I was in my backyard last week,
Right.
manning the grill, grilling up some. I'm gonna kind of kill my whole manning the grill thing here. Grilling up some nice veggie burgers, and I heard in the background what sounded like a dirt bike race, just like ambient in the air. You know, I don't know if you kind of know what a dirt bike race kind of sounds, where it's kind of like that wah, 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 wah kind of noise. Like it's kind of up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And I was like, that's weird. And then I heard it a little bit more, and I was like, all right, maybe they're not dirt bikes. It almost sounds like sport bikes, like racing on a track. It doesn't sound like, because sometimes I'll hear sport bikes, because I live close enough to the highway that some of these like straight piped 1000cc bikes will go by and you can hear them at the house. But this wasn't like that. It was a little bit muffled. It had that motorcycle sound, and it was, consistent up and down from high RPM to like a steady low RPM to a high RPM. I was like, that's weird. And then it stopped. And then maybe a minute after it stopped, I heard the very distinctive sound of air ratchets, like going like crazy, like not just one air ratchet, just like a bunch of air ratchets, like a NASCAR pit stop. I was like, what is happening? So I had to do a little Googling and figure out what's going on. Because I was like, there's definitely some kind of racing happening in my neighborhood right now. And I don't know how that's possible because there's no racetracks in my neighborhood. It turns out I was wrong. There is a racetrack 10 minutes from my house. I've lived here for 3 years. Well, it'll be 3 years in May. So almost 3 years.
I spent a month there and I wouldn't have guessed this.
Well, when you were here, there was no racing going on. So you wouldn't have heard it.
Yeah, but it's like a grid pattern neighborhood.
Yeah, well, on the outskirts of this grid pattern neighborhood is the Adobe Mountain Speedway.
Mm.
It is a 5th mile dirt track. So not quite a quarter mile, it's a little less than a quarter mile. And what I heard was 600cc, so motorcycle engine, midget cars, full winged midget cars running around the track. And then when they stop, obviously the air ratchets that I heard were air ratchets pulling off wheels and tires. So I did a little more Googling and a little more research to figure out what the schedule is up there. I know you're actually coming out to visit again in a few weeks. And
I
when
know
you're
I'm going to
here,
miss the NASCAR race there.
you're going to miss the NASCAR race,
Just
but
miss
you're
it.
here for an event there, and you're here for
Yeah.
the NHRA Nationals. So that'll be kind of cool if we get to those. But we're definitely going to go to Adobe Speedway because we might as well. It's right around the corner. It's probably not so loud that we can't take Marco as well, and Marco will love it. I forget what event is happening that day, but not only do they run 600 seats, so there's 2 oval tracks built into one there. They either do the 5th mile oval or they have a smaller 10th mile oval. They use the 10th mile oval for go-karts, and they use the 5th mile oval for these 600cc midget cars, and they also do flat track motorcycle racing, which I don't know how familiar you are with flat track, but those are the motorcycles that don't have front brakes and they just go sideways around the track the whole time.
Yeah.
So super rad to watch, and I'm super excited. And they're doing a flat track race this Saturday night, and I will be there for sure. So expect plenty of pictures.
Nice.
It's literally like the Friday night races or maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday races they do. If you go on a Thursday night, it's literally free to spectate according to the website. And then like on a Saturday night, the main event is like $10. So I don't know how I didn't know this was there. I've never heard it in the past before. The only thing I can think is that just the air that night was just right that the sound was carrying towards my house. And I just heard it loud enough that I was like, holy crap, there's race cars somewhere in my neighborhood. I need to know what's going on. So hopefully I have a report by next episode where I can say how cool the event space is. But I'm pretty stoked on going up there and checking that out and seeing this flat track racing this weekend. So way into it. That's going to be cool.
Sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, as a local, we have some friends here that like to go to Star Speedway. I got to go with them. I guess they have like a beer garden too.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, Star Speedway is more a traditional. Like it's a quarter mile oval, and they do a lot of the like. What do they call that racing? Where it's like super stocks or something they call them. There's like little junkyard Dodge Neons with cages, and they race them.
They're I guess doing a Panther chassis class.
Okay, I know they also have like full on modifieds. I think they run modifieds there, which are the open wheel. Like it's like a NASCAR tube frame with not a full body on it. I think they run those there too. So Star Speedway is most famous because if you go on YouTube, you can find videos of the spectator drags that happen there as well. Which the spectator drags are where you go out there with your street car and you pair off 2 cars at a time. And it's standing start, 1 lap. And unfortunately, there's no rules, and people go out there with their nice street cars, and if you go out there the wrong guy, they're allowed to bump you if they want. So there's definitely some interesting videos of guys out there in very nice cars getting hit by some guy in a junk box trying to win. So it's definitely interesting. An interesting dynamic. We actually have some friends that have done that, and more power to them because I would not.
Weird.
So, yeah. Yeah, they're also famous for their Halloween Howler, which is like 75 cars on track at once, just end to end, and it's basically a demo derby. So it's an interesting place. If you've never been, you should go. I went a few years ago. So, but yeah, no, I'm stoked to check out this facility. They also have, it looks like they have RC car racing tracks on property, which is probably slightly dangerous for me to see. So, whatever. Anyway, what else are you going on, Andrew? Anything good?
That's about it.
That's about it. Yeah, I got nothing else going on this week. I had some car news I wanted to go over, but then we had a whole debacle with my computer, and I had it all on that computer, and it's not on this computer, so we'll just go, and I guess everybody already knows their car news, so hopefully learn it somewhere else, because they're not learning it from us today.
We had local car news here that was weird, because McMulkin Chevrolet up in Nashua.
Okay.
I think that's where they are.
Yes, they are.
Was apparently the #1 Corvette dealer last year.
They have been for a long time.
So they got to do allocations for the Stingray, or the heck it's called,
E-Ray.
E-Ray.
Yep.
So like right before it got cold, like dudes were waiting outside for like hours to get their allocation.
Okay.
It was on the local news. I was like, that's weird, but okay, sure.
Interesting. Do you want to know a fun fact about McMulkin Chevrolet?
Sure.
I worked there for 4 hours.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did. Well, it's 4 hours. So if nope, this is pre-podcast days. I moved to actually Nashua, New Hampshire.
Wait, this is like 10 years before the podcast.
Yep, I moved to Nashua, New Hampshire for a short period of time, and I took a job up there because at the time I was working at a dealership in Danvers, Massachusetts, and the commute from Danvers, Massachusetts to Nashua was not worth the pay I was making at the dealership. So I got a job at a dealership in Nashua, which was McMulkin Chevrolet. And I was a parts counterman, and I had been a parts counterman in Massachusetts for a while, so I knew how to be a counterman. I worked at the Chevrolet dealer in Danvers. So I went up there, and they hired me as a parts counter guy at an hourly rate plus a sales commission,
Mm-hmm.
which made sense to me at the time because the pay structure worked out to be about maybe what I'd been making before, maybe even a little bit more. So I took the job. I went in there, and my first day, I go in, and I walked up to the parts counter, and I introduced myself to all the parts guys because I hadn't met them yet. I only met the manager. And they were like, "Oh, so what are you here for?" I was like, "He hired me as a parts counter guy." And they were like, "Oh, we don't need one." And I was like, "Well, that's weird because I just quit my job and came up here to work here." And the manager came out, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, hey, welcome here. We'll start doing this." And I was like, "Okay." So he goes, "We need you out back." I was like, "All right." He's like, "Well, we need you out back doing stocking shelves and stuff." I was like, "Okay. What about working the front counter?" He's like, "Oh, we don't really need a front counterman right now." I was like, "Well, my pay is based on my hourly plus a commission on parts sales." He's like, "Yeah, you can fill when they go to lunch and stuff." And I was like, "Huh." So it was an order day. I put all the parts away that morning, and I was done by lunchtime. And I went out to the guy. I was like, "All right, I'm done putting all the parts away. What should I do? Can I work the front counter now?" And he's like, "Well, maybe you can sweep." I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Maybe you can sweep the floors." And I was like, "Okay." So I went out back and swept the floors. And then I came back, and I was like, "Well, I'm going to lunch." And he goes, "All right, excellent." And I went to lunch, and I never went back. So that was my 4 hours of employment at the Corvette selling capital of the United States, because they totally bait and switched me. And I was like, "Nope, that's not going to happen. I'll find another job at a dealership somewhere else." And that's when I went. I'm sure you do remember that I worked at the BMW dealer in Stratton, New Hampshire for a while. So
I don't, but sure.
yeah, it was 20 years ago plus now. So it is what it is. 20 years ago? No, probably close to it. 15 years ago? I don't know. It was a long time ago. So I didn't live in Nashua very long, so I wound up working back down in Massachusetts again. But yeah, no, it was 4 hours that I'll never forget, because I've never walked out on a job before or since, and I definitely had never done it in such a quick span of time. So, oops. Yeah, the whole bait and switch didn't work well for me there. So yeah, I don't have good feelings about McMulkin Chevrolet, but I do know they are the largest Corvette dealer in the country.
Weird.
Oh, actually, one other funny story about McMulkin Chevrolet. They used to do an all Camaro Corvette day there, where it was like a car show. And I went in my Camaro to it once, and there was a guy who was a couple cars over from me who all day long was dressing his tires with like tire shine all day long. He kept reapplying it all day. When the shine would go away a little bit, he'd reapply it. But not only did he do it in the sidewall, he was doing the entire tread of the tire all day long. And he crashed leaving the car show, and it was amazing. So he went to pull out onto the road that's in front of the dealership and immediately spun into the ditch. Immediately. Not even hardly any throttle, just absolutely totally greasy tires. So that's another fun McMulkin Chevrolet show. McMulkin Chevrolet story, excuse me. So yeah, I have two memories of that place, and those are it. Their Corvette showroom is like 3 stories tall. It's crazy. That's how many Corvettes they have. So anyway, social media time, Andrew. What do you want to push?
Well, follow the podcast, Off Topic Podcast on Facebook. Don't really post much there. It's mostly on Instagram. Come over to Instagram, Off Topic on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, Erased in Anger. We've got Parked on the Block on Instagram. If you want to give us a follow there, put some more stuff up. Parked on the Block is also on Twitter. Apparently there was a problem with Twitter today. It's broken again. Who knows? Follow me on Twitter. I am Race and Anger on there. Race and Anger on Instagram. Brad, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter now. I haven't been very good at posting because I do not understand how it works, but I'll figure it out. I'm DeSantis_Brad because obviously I screwed that up too. Also, follow me on Instagram at TSISS350. Instagram also has Scale Autocast and all the other things that Andrew mentioned. And obviously Parked on the Block is our newest and thing we're pushing the most right now. So follow us all over the place.
Just go to parkedontheblock.com, actually.
Yes, please go to parkedontheblock.com. Start reading the stories. Comment on the stories would be cool. We're trying to get some comments going on. That's really what we're trying to push for, because that's how you build a community, right?
Yep. And we do have
Start a conversation.
autofftopicpodcast.com. So you can go check that out too.
Yep. All kinds of stuff. You can find us everywhere.
Mm-hmm. All right. Deep Cars Analog and Aim for the Roses.